the Royal Choral Society gave its first performance on the 8th of May 1872. The choir's first conductor included the Hallelujah Chorus from the Messiah in that inaugural concert. It has subsequently performed the chorus on Good Friday afternoon at the Royal Albert Hall every year since 1876. This great work was written in the midst of one of the coldest years in European history, and the story of its performance is strange given its writer and where he lived and worked. A German immigrant to London, George Friedrich Handel settled in London in 1712 after training around Europe. Over the next 30 years he was to have great success in London. But by 1741 the public taste for his Italian operas was fading, and Handel was struggling to keep up. In the middle of that cold summer, Charles Jennens, a wealthy landowner with musical and literary interests and a passionate Protestant, sent Handel a new libretto in English. In a letter to a friend, Jennens wrote,
"I hope he will lay out his whole genius and skill upon it, that the composition may excel all his former compositions as the subject excels every other subject. The subject is Messiah."
Charles Jennens, he's kind of almost airbrushed out of history, but in terms of the work, when you see the way he crafted the text and the lines from the King James Bible and the Psalms, it lays itself ready for Handel to step right in and do some of his greatest work.
Handel received Jennens' libretto in July 1741 and began work on his first work in English at the end of August. He completed the Messiah in a mere 24 days. At the end of his manuscript, Handel wrote the letters SDG, Soli Deo Gloria, to God alone the glory. In the midst of the cold atmosphere of weather, growing debts, and newspaper criticism, Handel received an invitation from Lord Devonshire, the then Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, to go to Dublin to perform some concerts. Ever the entrepreneur, Handel accepted the invitation and set off for Dublin. Here, in an unassuming corner of Dublin's Temple Bar, is an archway which is all that remains of the great Fishamble Street Music Hall that played host to Handel in 1741.
It was a predominantly Protestant city, Dublin, at that point, and they were really trying to reinforce that it was a cultural centre, and so they were bringing in people from all over Europe. So you had phenomenal Italian musicians in Dublin at the time, and I mean every night there was something. There was a theatrical or a musical or something. You know, the amount of theatres just off Dame Street alone was just phenomenal at that time, much more than there are now.
Today, the hotel name next door and a small plaque are the only clues to the site of the first performance of one of the most famous choral works of all time. After holding some lucrative concerts for money in the Fishamble Street Hall, Handel had decided that he would like to try out his new English composition. This initially caused a bit of crisis when the Dean of St. Patrick's, the redoubtable and grumpy Jonathan Swift, who didn't approve of bringing religion into theatre, refused permission for his choristers to sing. Swift was finally persuaded by Handel staging the event as a charity concert.
for the relief of the prisoners in the several jails and for the support of Mercer's Hospital in Stephen Street and of the charitable infirmary on the Inn's Quay.
So they had a rehearsal, I think it was on the 9th of April, it was in the morning, and that was packed, absolutely packed, the rehearsal. They only had one full rehearsal, so that gives you some idea. Putting on something like The Messiah with one rehearsal it would focus the concentration. But the people who attended it were absolutely raving about it, and it created an incredible buzz. And Handel himself, of course, played. He had his own organ apparently brought over from London, and he played himself at the premiere.
Many of the initial 600 attending may well have wanted also to gawp at the mezzo-soprano Suzanne Kibber, who was at the centre of a scandal in London, where she had recently been taken to court by her husband for adultery with their lodger. However, a Dublin clergyman, the Reverend Delaney, was so overcome by Susanna's rendering of "he was despised," that reportedly he leapt to his feet and cried, "Woman, for this be all thy sins forgiven thee."
King of kings,
The performance earned unanimous praise from the assembled press.
Far surpass anything of that nature which has been performed in this or any other kingdom.
For me, as a composer and a musician and conductor, it sort of really charges the imagination when you try to imagine what that first performance was like.
This glorious music that holds the ghosts of devastation and starvation of a freezing famine is still sung all over the world and remains Handel's greatest work, and its famous chorus sung every year by the redoubtable Royal Choral Society, who, it is thought, have performed the magnificent Hallelujah Chorus more than any other choir on the planet.